want me to do the clicker for the slideshow, or just pay attention and you throw something at me if I need to advance it?
I don't, you know what? Sherry, the gal in the pink sweatshirt, is the presenter.
Okay.
So,
Let me talk to her.
yeah, okay. And then we're gonna.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the HLAA West Valley November. I didn't change it on my paper. February. Okay. February chapter meeting, February 14th. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce Sherry Collins. Well, actually, before I do that, let me give you a couple of quick little housekeeping type things. We do have the induction loop here, so if you have the telecoil in your hearing instrument, please turn it on. We also have cart captioning here so you can read Sherry's presentation. So those are some important things. And then I would just like to say that as Sherry gets to the end of her presentation, you may, maybe before question answers, or you may want to go and get refreshments because we'll be cleaning them up a little earlier than we normally do at the end of our meeting. So I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, there we go. So our presenter today is Sherry Collins. She's the executive director of the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and the Hard of Hearing. And she is a nationally recognized deaf advocate for the, nationally recognized advocate for the deaf and the hard of hearing. And she has been the executive director here in Arizona since 1998. Before moving to Arizona, she was an administrator for 5 years at the North Carolina Division of Services for the Deaf and the Hard of Hearing. And she also has a bachelor's degree in child development from Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., and a master's degree in adult education and organizational development from North Carolina State University. So we're really very happy that once she came to Arizona, she decided to stay here as long as she has, and she's been a part of the commission here. So besides being on a number of different boards, she has many other interests, which include practicing Reiki, level 2 Reiki. I hope I said that the right way. And she is interested in different energies, and she loves to travel internationally. So we are just so excited to have Sherry here today, who's going to start by telling us her hearing loss story and share with us all of the work that she provides for people who are deaf and hard of hearing in the Arizona. Thank you, Sherry. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Can you give me a hand wave, or that way I know you can hear me, because I can't hear you. Okay, you can hear me. Okay, very good. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm a little rusty in speaking because of COVID. I have not done a presentation in person in a couple of years, so, but I'm comfortable speaking to a group. It's just that it's been a long time, and I'm dressing very casual because I had a foot surgery, so, and I'll explain about why I'm wearing this special sweatshirt. But it's good to be here, and especially in the West Valley of HLAA chapter meeting, because I live on the west side too, and I always say the west side is the best side. So I didn't have to travel that far to get here, because I live in the southwest, which is in Goodyear area. It's where I live, which is close to where Fred and Pat live. We live very close to each other in the same area. So good to be here, and now, because of the timing, I believe I have, 50 minutes, 45 minutes? Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. So I'm being mindful of my time. I have my phone here. So I'm going to give you a little story about who I am, and then I'm going to get into about our agency. And so let me see if I can figure out how to do this without my glasses. Oh, where do I point it here? Where's the infrared at? Do I got to point it this way?
No.
Like, where's the signal?
Okay, I'll just do it from here.
Okay. So, do you know today is Arizona's birthday? Did you know that? Just 1912. So Valentine's Day and February 14th is Arizona's birthday. So maybe some of you, I don't know, if you're not from Arizona, it's the beautiful state of Arizona. So today is happy birthday, Arizona. All right, so that's me when I was a little kid. And first of all, let me tell you, when we're as a kid, I think we don't have any, we're fearless, we're brave, we're willing to try anything. You will jump off the cliff, or we'll be willing to ride a bike, and we fall, we go sledding. We're not afraid, we're fearless. But a person who is deaf, there's some fears that goes along with it. So this is me, my natural curly hair that I had back then. And I'm going to go on to the next slide because I can't remember what was the next one, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. Here we go. This is it. So when I was a child, I was born deaf, profoundly deaf. Both ears. I wear a hearing aid and a cochlear implant. I've had this implant for about 15 years, I believe, 15, 17 years, I'm not sure. And I got it here, of course. I've been in Arizona for almost 25 years now, and I'm originally from Chicago. Anybody from Chicago? Yay! I'm a diehard, Chicago's in my blood. All my family are in Chicago. I'm the only one that lived out here. I have one cousin that moved out here a couple years ago because his wife family is originally from here, so they moved out from Chicago for so many years so she could be closer to her family up in Scottsdale. But that was just a couple of years ago, so all of my family up in Chicago. So I get excited when I talk to other people that are from Chicago, because especially in the west side, we have a high percent of member of community that lived in from Chicago. So I'm thrilled that I only live 5 miles from Pasillo. I get the hot dogs and the Italian beef sandwiches up in Avondale, so I go there quite often. And then also we have Chicago pizza in Goodyear, which is one of my favorite places too. So I love pizza and Italian beef sandwiches, and that's what I made for Super Bowl over at my friend's house. I brought Chicago-style Italian beef sandwiches. So, are you hungry? So anyway, so this is my father. And the reason why I have a picture of him, because he passed away in 2016, so I am a special child in his eyes, and I'm the only daughter, and I have a brother who is 22 months older than me, so a year and a half, almost 2 years. He's older than me, and this is the picture of me at a school for the deaf. I went to Illinois School for the Deaf in 8th grade. So prior to that, I went to a public school. At that time, we didn't have the law to protect me as a deaf student in school. I didn't have an interpreter. I didn't have a note taker. All I had to do was read lips. That's all I had. That I had no right as a student in a public school. So things got harder. Then I ended up going to school for the deaf, and that's where I really learned using American Sign Language much later in my life. So if you go back one more time, I'm sorry, I can't remember what's on my notes on there. So when I went to the school for the deaf, it was a cultural change for me because I had to move away from Chicago to go to Jacksonville, Illinois. If you know, just down south, which is about 3.5 hours, 4-hour drive from where I am from, outside of Chicago. So I had to live on campus. So I away from home, away from my family, and I had to learn deaf culture, American Sign Language, and get involved with all the activities. My self-esteem before going to the school for the deaf, I never met a deaf person in my life until I went to school for the deaf. I thought I was the only person that was different all my life. Even we're in my neighborhood, always had to go to this special school across town in where I grew up. So when I went to school for the deaf in Jacksonville, that's where my life has changed. That's where I become an advocate because I found many people like me and a lot of my teachers were deaf. And I was like, I want to be you. I want to be like you. I want to be like you. So they gave me that permission and said, be who you are. You can be successful. So I always pride of my experience at the school for the deaf. Next slide, please. Then I'm fast forwarding. I met my husband. My husband is hard of hearing. He's a disabled vet, the Vietnam vet. His hearing loss is related to service. He had a bilateral hearing loss, a Meniere's disease. He's out running errands. He had to bring me because I can't drive with my boot. But he is hard of hearing, and he was a very active member of the HLAA old days when Rocky Stone was the executive director. My husband and Rocky Stone were very good friends back in the old days, and he was very an active member, and then Rocky passed, and things have changed. So my husband's happily retired, but he is hard of hearing, so it's kind of nice that he understands my hearing loss, and I understand his, that we've been married for almost 31 years in May, so he is my rock. Next slide. So, I am the first, when I moved to Arizona, the reason why I moved to Arizona, I was ready for a career change. I was ready to move up after I got my master's degree from North Carolina State University. And I'm ready to take more responsibility. I want to make a change. And Arizona job became open as the executive director. I did not want to move here. My husband is the one that applied the job for me, and that's a true story. I don't say that publicly, but my husband actually submitted my application. And he said, if you get an interview, you're going to go for it. And I said, I will. And that was the compromise, but he submitted my application. There's two, he did that twice. This job in London, and the one in London was dropped for a different reason. They just changed the position, so I wanted to go to London. But anyway, so it was my husband that wanted to move here. I did not want to move to Arizona. Did not want to move, because I didn't want to be too far away from Chicago, from my family, because North Carolina wasn't too far away. Well, anyway, so I moved here, and I became the first deaf director of the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I am the first registered deaf lobbyist in the United States. And I am the longest serving executive director across the nation, 25 years, and most of them last that long, so I don't know when my day will come, but I am still the longest executive director, because we have commissions like our office across the United States. There's about 38 offices, but they all structure differently. But we have our own, just the way their statute's written. Anyway, so there's an organization that we all get together as executive directors. So I am the longest serving executive director, not the oldest, but the longest. And since, because I've been here for 25 years, a lot of changes have been made for over 25 years that we're nationally recognized for our success. When I first came here, we only had a position of 9. Now we have 21. 21 positions, 21 staff. And the changes that I made is that, when I first came to Arizona, it was, at that time, it was more focusing on deaf community only. At that time when I was here, and because I'm married to a hard of hearing man, and I was very involved with the hard of hearing community in North Carolina at that time, and I think it was very important that we really need to be inclusive of all people with hearing loss, deaf, hard of hearing, and family members with children who have a hearing loss. So which is why we have positioned within our office deaf specialists, hard of hearing specialists, deaf blind specialists, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. When we have all of our hearing loss, we have a different experience of our hearing loss, different age of onset. And I recognize that, so you need to, in my office, I believe we should separate each one. You have more focus, because a lot of other states combine. One person does everything, and I disagree with that. So I think we became a model, and many, many other states are adopting what we do, a hard of hearing specialist program. And so I'm very proud of the staff, and I'm going to introduce you one of my staff members in a moment. Okay, next slide. So, because of the changes that we made on a national level, one of the biggest changes that I'm very proud of that we were a model for other states to adopt is our T-coil bill, the hearing aid, the T-coil bill. At that time, I can't remember what year, oh my goodness, it's been a while, but we introduced a bill that requires hearing aid dispensers and audiologists to explain to you what is a telecoil, what are the benefits when you purchase a hearing aid. We want to make sure that that information is included, what's it called, bill of sale. In other words, like your invoice, you're getting a bill, a statement. The audiologists and hearing aid dispensers in Arizona are required to say, do you know what are the benefits of using your T-coil? Why? A lot of times the audiologists or hearing aid dispensers do not take the time to explain to you other benefits of using your hearing aid or your implant. Because we get a lot of calls way back then, and people say, well, I never know what that's for. But once they discovered, well, the FM, now we have the loop system, but back then, it's the wire, the loop, and we had to take the time to educate the people who are hard of hearing or new to the hearing loss, don't realize the other technology benefit, the infrared, if you use the headset, if you go to a movie, and that because the professional fails to educate the consumers about using their hearing aid. And I always use it as an example. You buy a car, once you get the key and you leave the parking lot, they don't care about you. Well, that's how I feel about hearing aid dispensers and audiologists in general. It's a lot better now, but back then, it was like, we don't have time for you. You bought your hearing aid, you're on your own. Well, they really need to spend some time. So because of that law that was passed, a lot of other states adopted our model and for better. So I'm very proud of, so those are just some of the examples that we have made some changes in Arizona with the hard of hearing community. So I wanted to mention that. I mean, there's just many other things, but that was one of them. And of course, you know, at the Women's March, I was really honored to ask to be one of the keynote speakers a couple years ago, and that's me at the Capitol, and being one of the keynotes at the Women's March. And I had mentioned that I am the longest serving executive director, and this is the organization I was talking about. I was the president of the National Association of State Agencies Serving Deaf and Hard of Hearing. That's the group that I was talking about. And then I was involved with different national organizations. So, the next slide. So, the reason why I share my story is, you know, and I can say this because I am deaf since birth. My husband's hard of hearing, and I wish we wrote a book together of our marriage for 30 plus years, because we have so many funny stories that we should write that about that. We should write about all these funny things that happen in our communication. Being hard of hearing or having hearing loss is not a bad thing. The technology is available. It all goes within your attitude, your heart. It's up to you how you want to live your life. I chose to be happy. I chose to live the fullest I can give, the fullest. And that's my attitude. So you see that smiling? I love that smiling icon. I use that all the time, and this is why. And it also has hearts on there because it's Valentine. So, and this dog right here, I had 4 Boston Terriers, and my other 2 passed during COVID. So they make me happy. Boston Terriers make me happy. We're going to get another one when we're ready. So I share this with you, you know, as you're learning or adjusting your hearing loss, or sometimes we're isolated, and I know many of us do not like to get together with family or going out to eat with the noise. I get that. My husband does not like going to a restaurant. Like yesterday, we went to a restaurant in Goodyear, kind of new. The music was so loud, and it was horrible music. It was some kind of rap music that it just made it worse. And he said, we're never coming back to this restaurant again. We won't. We understand that. And, but that doesn't discourage us from going out to eat. We just have to find another location that both of us can communicate and understand each other, especially with my husband. His lip reading skills is not the best. I can lip read in any noisy environment. For him, it's stressful, and it just irritates him. So I understand that. So what do? We try to make the best of it. It's like, okay, we won't come back this place unless they get better. So we move on to another location. So anyway, so I just want to kind of put it on a positive note that, you know, technology, I'm so grateful that we have the technology now compared to the old days. And we are living the time. You got this room, it's loop. We can go to a movie. They have open caption movie on certain days of the week. But we still have a lot of work to do. And we can't do that without your support and the community support. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're doing and how you can help us to push the advocacy and make a change. So I'm going to move on, talk about Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. So before I do that, I want to recognize, and I don't know if you know this, but I feel I need to tell you this. I have 2 board members who sit on our board are here in this room. Do you know who they are? You don't know? Well, I'm going to call their name, and you'll probably know who they are. One is Melanie. Melanie is our board member as a hard of hearing representative. There's Melanie, and then we have Fred Williams. There you are, the tall guy. Fred, both of them are our hard of hearing representative. We have a board of 14 members. 4 are hard of hearing, 4 are deaf, and then we have 1 representative of different categories. For example, licensed interpreter, licensed audiologist, licensed hearing aid dispenser, Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind, Department of Economic Security, and a parent rep. I think I got all that covered. So I'm very grateful to have Fred and Melanie here in this room, and you should know that. And if you have any concern, what we do at the commission, talk to them. They can bring issues to the board, or they can bring issues to me. That's what they're here for. So use them as your ally to work with us if there's something that we don't know about, because they know how to find me. So I'm going to do a real quick overview about what we do so that you have some information and resources, maybe your neighbor, a friend, or yourself. Please let them know we're here to serve anybody in the state of Arizona related to hearing loss, from birth to senior citizen to great. We are the clearinghouse for information related to hearing loss in the state of Arizona, and we are a government state agency. Our office is right by the Capitol in downtown, and we do all kinds of presentations and training. We do advocacy. We're involved with mediation if there's a lawsuit and they need a subject matter expert. We can be part of the mediation. We provide telephone relay service known as 711. A lot of people don't use relay because they use their phone technology. The telephone equipment distribution program is what you really need to make sure you know about. If you need a specialized telephone with a volume amplification, when I mean telephone, I'm talking about the one you plug in the wall. That's called landline. We still have those phones available for those who have a hearing loss, and you still have the landline that plugged on the wall through the landline telephone line at no cost to you. But you have to go through an application process because you have to get an approval, a verification that you have a hearing loss by your audiologist or hearing aid dispenser or your doctor. And we have that information. So take advantage of the resources that is available to you at no cost. And then we license sign language interpreters. We have 2 interpreters right here in front of me. They're helping to work with me, and also I thought we might have one of our deaf staff come here, so she must be stuck at the Capitol. So we oversee sign language interpreters licensure except for K through 12. We're not responsible to license educational interpreters. Next slide, please. So one of the staff members here is Christy Abrams. Christy, can you come up here real quick so that people know who you are? I did not bring my business card because you're going to talk to her. Christy is really your point of contact. And if you have not met her, I hope you do by the end of the day and get her card. And her information will be on this slide, which we bought copies, and she has them. And she has her own business card. Not that I don't want to talk to you, because what's going to happen, I'm going to say you need to talk to Christy. Christy is our hard of hearing specialist, and Christy herself had a severe hearing loss, and she has a good story to share that you need to hear her story someday. And I know what our office had done to her personally since she's been working at the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, dealing with her hearing loss. So I always like to hear her story. So I want to make sure you connect her name and face because she's here. So thank you, Christy, for being here and bring all the materials. All right, we're going to move on. So these are just numbers that people don't think about. We have over 1.1 million people in Arizona have a hearing loss. That includes deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind, all of that. And I use that number, especially with policy decision makers. They don't realize that technically that's about 16% of the population of Arizona. So you think about voting. These are your constituents. 16% of us vote, I hope. So that's a high numbers. Obviously, the high percentage are the hard of hearing population in Arizona. But that's a very powerful number that we use that people don't realize we have a lot of people in Arizona with hearing loss that we need a lot of help, a lot of resources. So I'm just not going to run through those numbers, but if you want to, I mean, you can have a copy of the slide, and I would imagine Melanie can share them with you as well. Next slide. So, and I mentioned over 1 million in Arizona, 20% now, teenagers, well, of course, you can hear the car and you're in the traffic light, boom, boom. My future client, right there. You can, you know, that loud noise, the younger generation are just simulated noise, the game, you know, when they play the game machine, or whatever, the television, I don't know what I don't know, the arcade, whatever those things, I don't play, but the music, everything is so loud, restaurants, and you go to a shopping mall, some of the department stores, music is so loud. Think about those workers that work there 8 hours a day, every day, the damage in their ears, that number is growing. And then about 20,000 are culturally deaf. I consider myself culturally deaf, even though I function like a hard of hearing person because I can hear some with my hearing aids and my implant, but I am, because I was born deaf and I sign fluently in American Sign Language. So if you think and look at over 730, I'm going to round it up, yeah, 739,000 people in Arizona over age of 60 have a hearing loss. And then the baby. 24 out of 1,000 are born with a hearing loss. So these are really powerful numbers. So we use this to educate decision makers, policy, when you want to make a point and say, you know, we need more services, not accessible. These are the numbers that we use. Next slide. And I'm not going to get into that. I hope you know the terminology, but real quickly, the terminologies that our office uses, and everybody has their own preference, but we use deaf and hard of hearing. We do not use the word hearing impaired. That's not the terminology that we use because technology has changed and hearing impaired is perceived as broken ears. Well, we don't use that term, so we come out publicly to say deaf and hard of hearing, and then deaf blind. We say all of those because these are the categories of the community that we serve. So that is the term that we do not encourage. Even media, reporters, we all tell them, do not use the word hearing impaired. So I'm just putting that out there. That's the terminology that we use. Next slide. So being an advocate, we all have to be an advocate, whether we like it or not. And yes, it's exhausting. I'm tired of it. I do this for a living, and personally, it's exhausting. And I can tell you some of the situations that I get stressed out to this day, no matter what. But I have to prepare myself. Okay, Sherry, you're going to go to the airport. Everybody's going to be talking. You can't hear. Be prepared. And I get my mindset. So I'm prepared. When I'm going to the airport, I have to be prepared with my communication strategy. The one thing that I do, when we go to that x-ray, the security clearance, when we drop off our bag, their suitcase, before we go to security clearance, that's the part that I hate the most. Because so many people are talking, security sometimes they're talking, they're yelling. So what I do, I sign. I want them to know I can't hear because we're invisible. How do they know that I can't hear? Until they try to talk to me, and I'm afraid they're going to jump and attack me and knock me down for not cooperating. I worry about that because I have seen that at the airport when somebody's not responding to a security command. Boy, they really go after them, and I don't want that to happen to me. So what do? I make my safety zone, my alert. I make sure, just do my ear. So and I have their eye contact. This person can't hear. So I'm looking at them, and they're looking at me, and then I'm like, everything good? Nothing going off? No buzzing? They say, you're good? Good. Then I go through. That's one thing I hate to go through, but I have to be prepared. And that's human. and we all do. We all have to deal with that. And it's just like the ticket counter, things like that. Because I travel, and my husband, with him being hard of hearing, everything is distorted to him. So we really have to rely on what we can understand. He can't read lips, I can read lips. So I'm using that story because that's the human nature of our life, that you're not alone if you feel that way. And the other thing I always get stressed when I go to the hospital, when I have my foot surgery, I have to take my hearing aids out. When I take my hearing aids out, I hear zip. I mean, nada, nada, nada. So I make sure I tell my doctor when I have my pre-op appointment, then when I check in, because you go so many nurses, there's like a revolving door, and I make sure I am deaf. This is what I want. It's exhausting, stressful. I still do that. So I'm sharing that because you're not alone. And it's okay to do that. So being an advocate is really important because that's what we want. Try to minimize our stress level by being upfront and be prepared. I'm going to stop right there. Next slide. The one thing that I want to talk about that we hear a lot in our community, hard of hearing community, especially that relies on captioning, we are not a fan of this, ASR. What that means is automated speech recognition. That means if you're using your voice and the voice picked up the speech, well, try to use that with me. Sometimes it's just jobble, don't know what I'm saying, you know. And it's not reliable. Sometimes the background noise, the caption is not accurate. So as an agency, we do not advocate ASR for official meetings or captioning of an event, things like that. And this is really important on the advocacy part. If you don't feel that ASR is appropriate, especially you rely on captioning for information, you need to make sure you communicate with whoever you're working with. ASR is getting better. Technology is getting better, but we're not there yet. I am glad you had the captioner, and I know she's happy that me to say this. And I'm going to tell you a true story. On the advocacy that we do, last year's Super Bowl, I love football. Okay, I'm a big college football fan. Pro depends on Super Bowl. I like Super Bowl. Well, last year, because I'm a big Matthew Stafford fan from California, played LA Rams because he's from Georgia, and that's where I'm an advocate for. I love to follow the University of Georgia football team because my husband's from Georgia. So if you hear a little southern accent, it's from him. So anyway, last year, during football, because that last year it was Channel 12, I can't remember, it doesn't matter, it was one of the TV stations. Every year, Super Bowl broadcast rotates. So this year was Fox News. Last year, the caption was so bad that I couldn't even follow the Super Bowl game last year. So after the game was over with the next day, and I'm like talking to one of the captioners, Jen, who we love to use. So I'm talking to her, I said, something's not right. Well, come to find out, what happened was the local TV station turned on that, ASR, while the national Super Bowl, national TV station, say Channel 12, for example, NBC, their captioning was working fine. But when it feeds to the local same station, the ABC, it kicked out the national captioning. ASR took over. That's what happened last year. So because of Super Bowl in Arizona this year, I make sure we don't experience that in Arizona. So we worked with the Arizona Broadcast Association and said, please help us connect with the local Fox News in Arizona. Make sure their ASR switch is off so we can get the captioning from the national Super Bowl captioning feed. If you watched the game on the Super Bowl game, the captioning was wonderful. That's why we have to be careful when we say ASR is better than nothing. That is true, but not on Super Bowl. No, not on game day. Or you certainly don't want to use ASR for an emergency health information. If it's an emergency, you want to make sure you have people like the captioner in this room feeding correct information to us. I spent that time because I want you to really understand what that means. So this is not a solution to everything. Better than nothing, yes. So I'm getting out of my soapbox, but I'm giving you a true story, what an advocacy does, what happened from last year, and our experience in Super Bowl went very well with the captioning because of that work. You may not know that, but now you know. All right, next slide. These are just some of the logos. We've already noticed that. I mean, these are just the different logos that you will see signed, for interpreters or captioning. RCC is the relay conference captioning for like making a conference call. That's what RCC is, captioning. I'm just using some of those examples. Next slide. And I'm not going to get into this, but equipment distribution program is the essential part of our communication access. You can get services from our office at no cost. So if you're interested in learning more about it, please see Chrissy. Maybe you can invite one of our staff, Vicky, to come here. We can do like an assistive technology lab. We can show all the different equipment and for you to try and say, oh, this is what I really want, and then you can submit an application. The other thing that I was just talking at our table while we were waiting is how many of you have an iPhone or Android? Most, okay. Most have either an iPhone or an Android, and because we have a contract with the Arizona Relay Service, which is our 711, and the provider is T-Mobile. So we have T-Mobile as our provider for relay service. Well, T-Mobile has a great accessibility team. I'm talking about T-Mobile worldwide. They have a whole accessibility team to make sure the customers with T-Mobile as their provider have the best accessible services through their phone. If you ever want to consider what are the options, we can send a representative through our office to show you what are the features that if you want to consider T-Mobile. I'm not marketing, I don't even get money out of it. The reason why I'm talking about it, because I know their technology, I know their team. So we benefit nothing. I feel obligated to let you know the resources that are available. And not only that, you're going to save a whole lot of money. I just switched to T-Mobile recently from Verizon because I was spending a lot of money, my husband and I. So just be mindful that if you're really interested in learning on the different apps that you can use as a person who has communication challenges, understanding people, there's a lot of technology you can really benefit using your phone. So, next slide. These are some of the programs that we offer. We provide training for hospitals, nurses, doctors to better understand how to communicate people who are deaf and hard of hearing and deaf blind. So we have our own curriculum that we created, so it's called CARES. And then we have Let's Get to Work. It's our employment campaign. We want to encourage employers to hire deaf and hard of hearing deaf blind people. We are ready to work. We are good workers. Hire us. Don't be uncomfortable because we need interpreters or we need all these devices. Then we also have our own curriculum that provides training with police officers. We have a really good program. We get good responses of different police departments in different cities, specifically in our community, deaf and hard of hearing, deaf blind. The newest program I really wanted to talk to you about is Age of Access. That's for our senior citizen community who are deaf and hard of hearing, deaf blind in Arizona. That's something that we have not really focused on, and now we are really putting a lot of emphasis on this area on accessibility meaning communication and resources. So age of access, I'm going in the next slide. I think I talked about that. Yes, right here. Oh, it's cutting off. Let me see. I think it's up the top of the slide here. Let me see here. There we go. So we received special funding from the legislators to do a research on gathering information on senior citizens who are living in Arizona. So we're going to be sharing that information. You can do it online. We're going to have two versions. One is in American Sign Language, and another one is just English only. We really want your help to fill out those questions, because it's going to help us to get this data, this information, to work with our legislators to better provide services for our senior citizens in Arizona. So that money is going to be used for that. So we will be releasing that hopefully next month. Also, the Age of Access, we're going to have our own dedicated website for seniors only. So that way it's easy to navigate to find information specifically for senior citizens. We're also going to have a print newsletter for our community. We haven't done it yet. We have a template ready. You can download it, print it, or we will mail it to you. We're going to have our first Deaf and Hard of Hearing Senior Expo on March the 25th. It's going to be in Phoenix. I need to get some water. The reason why we have our own Senior Expo is because of communication. If you go to other Love and Life expos or other senior expos, it's just very noisy. It's hard to understand. It's hard to get the information because you can't communicate so well. We're providing the accommodation for our community for this event. So hopefully it's on a Saturday, March the 25th. So hopefully you can mark your calendar, and we're going to be sending that information. I don't know. Do we have that flyer, Christy? Okay. Okay. We'll email that. Christy will make sure you get that information. We want you to register so we know how many people are coming. So be looking for that information because it's going to be next month, March 25th. And we're partnering with different aging. Ariana Aging is a big organization, AARP. We're partnering with some of the major organizations to really talk about services for our community in Arizona for those deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind. Next slide. Okay, here's our save the date. We put this on social media. The event is going to be from 9 to 1. We're going to have a keynote speaker at 9:30 to 11, and he is going to talk about dementia with the risk factors who are deaf and hard of hearing. It's going to be a very interesting presentation. And this gentleman that we're flying in is from Seattle. So he's going to be the keynote at this event. So again, just remember this event. We'll make sure you get the information. Next slide. This is good timing. It's 1:46. Time for me to. I'm going to wrap up. I'm not going to get into this. This is the over-the-counter hearing aid, and if you could keep going. Let me see what else is on there. I think that's the end of it. Yeah. Can you go all the way down to the visor cards? That one. Nope, one more. And then I'm done. I just want you to know that we have a visor card, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, that you could put in your car. If you get pulled over, you can show that to the officer. If you get pulled over, to let them know you have a hearing loss. That is free, just so you know we have this available. We would have to mail it to you. I just want to make sure you can see what our visor card looks like, to keep in your car. And then that concludes my presentation, which is perfect time because it's 1:47. So the last slide is our contact information. And you can follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. And make sure you sign up our weekly e-news. If you don't know how to do that, Chrissy can help you, tell you where to sign up, or get your email address, and we can put you on our e-news. It goes out every Tuesday. and these are our website, and that is Christy's email address, and then our general info, it's sort of general public email address. So you can connect with us many different ways. So that includes my presentation. So it's a pleasure being here. I'm open to answer any questions. Are there any questions? Do we want to take questions or? Oh, let me. Can you turn the light on?
Okay. Any questions, Fred?
Sherry, do you have any idea at this point how the new administration how supportive they'll be of the deaf and hard of hearing in general?
Thank you for that question. I have to tell you, I'm extremely excited. They're very accessible. I've already met with the director of the what they call diversity inclusive DEIA. They're all about accessibility, diversity, inclusion, and equity. I've already met with the director, she's in the governor's office. I've already met with the deputy director of legislative policy affairs last week. So they're very accessible already. So they're very attentive, and they want to work with us. So I'm very excited. I think we're going to have some good opportunities with the new administration for our community.
Are there available lists of restaurants and theaters that tend to make the hard of hearing able to hear and understand available?
We don't have a comprehensive list. Now, I'm wondering, do you guys at the chapter HLAA, do you guys have a list that you guys put together?
No, we don't.
You do.
I think, Sherry, on your website, isn't there a list?
It's not comprehensive. It's very little. So that's what I'm saying. I know it needs some work. Let me put it this way.
Okay.
That's why I didn't want to get into that, because it needs some work. So to answer your question, we have some, but it needs to be updated. But you know what because you asked that question and you're in the West Valley, I'm going to have, and Christy lived on the west side as well. So Christy, maybe you can identify some movie theaters and when are they open captioning, and so that you could share that through the email, through the chapter. So that would be for movie theaters, to answer your question. For restaurant, it really depends on your preference, and everybody's hearing loss is different and where you sit. So it just depends. Because if you sit, some people don't like to sit in the restaurant. I like to sit in the bar. My husband and I like to sit in the bar. So it's going to be louder, so we have to identify where's a good place. So restaurant is always a challenge. And depending on where your local community is, so you have to ask your neighbors, so where are your favorite places? But my place may not be quiet enough for you, or vice versa. So restaurant's always a challenge. Unless you can get a private room, then that should be on the list. But a lot of them don't do that. That's a real challenge. Any other question?
First, just a comment on restaurants. You might all know this, but Pat and I always try to go to restaurants before rush hour, like 4 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's such a thing as a quiet restaurant. They are in Europe, but we're not in Europe. Sherry,
That's true, because and that's another thing. I'm glad you mentioned that. We don't eat during rush hour. Like, we haven't eaten lunch today. You know, I'm going to eat lunch, which is, by the time I eat lunch, it will be around 2 or 3 o'clock. That's a good time. That's what we usually do, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So do not go during rush hour. So if you want to go happy hour, oh well, I can't help you.
I have a question. I'm always fascinated by people's personal journeys. You were born deaf, and you didn't really start learning ASL until you were 14 or something like that. Between that period before you learned sign language, can you tell us a little bit about how you navigated through the hearing world?
I knew sign language before I went through school for the deaf, but it was called total communication. Basically, I was just signing and talking with more English-based. And then I had some home signs with my family, but it was all talking though. I mean, that was what I was up till I went to school for the deaf. But I'm an excellent lip reader, and that's how I can get through with hearing people, and because I'm an excellent lip reader. So I have a story that happened when I was in North Carolina. We had a police officer called. It was during the holidays, the Christmas, when I was working in North Carolina, and they had a video. There was a theft was being arranged at a Sears store and in the electronic TV department. They brought the video and asked me to read their lip, what would they saying, and I actually told them what it said. So I'm very good at lip reading, especially in the coaches on the field, and I can read their lips very well. And so that I have that gift, and my husband does not. And so he kind of looked at me, and I'm like, I said, oh, no, this is not, or he misunderstands his hair thing. And I'm not shy to tell people, look, I'm deaf, I read lips, so I am not shy. I mean, I'm just upfront, because I want to be able to communicate, so I have no shame of letting people know that I need to read their lips. I mean, I'll ask them to take their mask off if they don't mind, and they do. So, any other question?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
When I went to Gallaudet, I was fascinated by stories of deaf president now. Can you tell us anything about, you were there at that time, right? Can you tell us anything about that?
The Deaf President Now movement was 1998. That was my senior year in college, so I was very, very involved with that protest at Gallaudet University. Basically, the Board of Trustees had selected a hearing candidate to be the president of the university when there was another candidate who was deaf, just as qualified. So we protested because we just felt like it was just as discriminatory. Anyway, through that protest, that hearing president candidate withdrew her candidacy, and then the deaf president, King Jordan, became the president of the university at that time. So that was another thing that I had that story to share when I applied for this job. And because it happened in 1998, and of course it was 1998 is when I moved here, and I used that story so the community loved that, and I was like, I'm empowered. I'm not afraid to protest peacefully. I'm not afraid to fight for our rights peacefully. And because I am deaf, I know what it's like. I wake up as a deaf person. I don't care what I have in my ears. I am still deaf the rest of my life. So it's up to me. I'm not going to sit here and let people make a decision for me. Oh no, not with me. So that is why I am so passionate of the work that I do, because it affects me too, and it affects all of us. Somebody's got to do it.
We met King Jordan at Alda. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he is. I'm not a pushover. Any other? Yes. We need to get you a microphone so everybody can hear you.
I was admitted to the hospital several times in the past 6-7 months. And one time I was admitted to ER unexpectedly, of course. And I had trouble with the mask business. But what concerns me is that it didn't seem like there was any sensitivity among the staff understanding how to approach people like me when I was in the hospital. They just mumbled. And I said, can you just please lower it down? There was no chalkboard, no nothing. I can't explain how frustrating that is. I'm sure you know how that is. But this is, you know, this is the year 2023 now. There should be a big note in front of the people's face at the desk. Do this and do that. That's what I reached out, I filled out surveys, expressed my concerns. So I don't know. I'm a little disappointed in a way that it's not happening in the hospitals or medical fields. We have to be careful, of course, of COVID issues, but there's got to be a way of providing way of communication. You know, a lot of people just don't understand what a deaf person or a hard of hearing person goes through. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that story. One is, I always like to ask privately if you can tell Chrissy where that hospital it is. I want to know, because we can call and say, hey, you know, we have the training. We can offer some training, so you can get that information. Secondly, is that every hospital has, and then they call it different names, but it's like the patient advocate office or patient cares, depending on different office. But you have, as a patient, you have the right to file a complaint about your care at the hospital. And those are the things they should have follow up with you and say, what can we do better the next time in case you are admitted? But that doesn't always work that way. But that's the first thing, we really encourage you to do that. And if they have not followed up with you, you need to follow up, but let us know as well. I'm not saying that, you know, we can do miracles, but we can be your advocate. But that'll be the first thing that you do, the patient care or the patient's rights, whatever that is called, that hospital, you have that right. And that's why I share my story is, you know, ER, you can't prepare for that, but the hospital should be ready, you know, and to take care of you. If they realize that you are deaf, they should automatically know, okay, this man's not hearing me, we need to have this ready. And that's a very common story we hear for deaf and hard of hearing, and it is wrong. That's why we're doing this aging study for senior citizens who are deaf and hard of hearing, deaf blind in Arizona. We want those stories. Those are the stories that we can share with our legislators, policy decision making, to say, this is not okay. My life depends on the Medicare, and they can't give me the accommodation. We hear horrible stories, and we should not be in that place, unfortunately, and that's why I say I'm exhausted, because I have to do the same thing, and it's wrong. So for one is, what can we do to fix it? Let's find out that medical center, because I want to know if we provided training for them. If we did, we'll follow up and say, hey, you know, we're hearing some concern. If not, we want to offer our service. Cost them nothing, and it'll get them away from liability as well. So, and also we have some communication cards that you can take, you know, in our office. I mean, you know, if you want to have that, okay, there's some in the table back there, have that with you. Should have some kind of, you know, say, hey, I need this, is my communication card. But sometimes they just don't know what to do, and it's just unfortunate. And that's why we have our office to do this kind of work. But you have to help us to get through that process if we don't know your situation. We need to know about them, because we all have different situations, different experiences. If you tell us, that's how we can address them. What's the CAP? Oh, Communication Access Plan, CAP. That, Christy can give you those communication access plan. That was on the slide. So that Christy can help you with something that you can take with you, or a family member, because they can't go in that room with you, and if you're in an emergency, you know, just say, here, suppose you can't communicate, you're limited because you might be in an oxygen or whatever. Those are the kind of things that we have to be prepared for. And I share your frustration, but it should not stop and say, well, this is what it is. No, it's not. Any other question? Well, you know where to find us. Please use our service. We're here for you. And any questions you have, you can always contact us. So I really appreciate being here, and happy Valentine's Day and happy birthday, Arizona.
No break. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sherry, so much for presenting. Let's give Sherry a big round of applause, because I am just so excited not only to hear your personal story, but just obviously your advocacy. And you talked about all kinds of things that we share with our members.